Investigation to a burglary in the Catalina foothills. PCSD sharing this video today of 3 men breaking into a home through a back door and stealing valuables from a safe.
Catalina foothills man says when he and his wife were on vacation, a woman wearing an Amazon t-shirt knocked on their door claiming to have a package for them. When they didn't answer, he says a group of people she was with barged into their home and stole from them.
As the mystery into where Nancy Guthrie is, I've begun doing some research into the Catalina foothills, and I found these 2 robberies from September of 2025. There was one arrest made, the female who you see in the next video, with an Amazon package, and I couldn't help but think of Nancy's Amazon
Monica,
package.
the homeowner, wants to remain anonymous, but he says it happened here behind me in his gated community. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is now investigating. When Ben was inside his home near Alvernon and River on September 2nd, he got this unexpected visitor.
A gal was wearing an Amazon t-shirt.
I have a package that needs a signature.
Ben says he and his wife did not answer right away because they were not expecting any delivery. He says the woman holding the blue envelope stuck around for a few seconds, but when they went to answer the door, she left.
We didn't think anything serious, we just let it be.
That was until Ben says the same woman wearing an Amazon t-shirt came back to his front door this past Saturday after 1 p.m.
The package.
But Ben says this time he and his wife were not home because they were on vacation.
She came with a SUV.
Ben is referring to this blue SUV on the right side of this Ring camera video.
And with another gentleman, or even more than one gentleman.
And after no answer, the group left.
45 minutes later, the same vehicle came. The robbers came through the side. One of them came through the side of the house. The other 2 joined him from the wash.
Ring camera video shows multiple men hitting Ben's back door. Ben says the men used this rock to gain entry.
They took a lot of jewelry. They took a safe box and they pepper sprayed our dog.
The dog is okay, but Ben admits his security system was turned off this past Saturday.
The silence of the Catalina foothills is usually absolute, broken only by the occasional cry of a coyote or the rhythmic hum of a central air unit. On the night of January 31, 2026, that silence was a shroud. Nancy Guthrie, 84, had just spent a pleasant evening with her family, a routine gathering that ended with her being dropped off at her Tucson home at 9:48 p.m. She was a woman of habit, a pillar of her community, and the mother of one of the most recognizable faces in American news, Savannah Guthrie. As she prepared for bed, the digital clock on her nightstand ticked toward a moment that would shatter her family's world. Outside, a shadow moved against the jagged silhouette of the Santa Catalina Mountains. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1, the security system at the Guthrie residence flickered to life. A doorbell camera, activated by motion, captured a chilling tableau. A figure, approximately 59 with a medium build, stood on the porch. The individual was a study in calculated anonymity. A dark ski mask obscured the face, heavy gloves covered the hands, and a distinctive Ozark Trail backpack, a common brand found at any local Walmart, was cinched tight against their back. The figure didn't linger. With a practiced, violent efficiency, the intruder forced entry. Inside, the struggle was brief but brutal. Nancy, who suffered from limited mobility and relied on a pacemaker, was no match for the intruder's strength. By the time the sun rose over the Arizona desert, the house was empty. Nancy was gone, but she had left behind a harrowing trail. When her family arrived at noon after she failed to log into her virtual church service, they found the front door ajar. On the porch and just inside the entryway, investigators would later find small, dark droplets, blood that forensic testing would confirm belonged to Nancy. The most terrifying detail was what remained. Her life-sustaining medications sat undisturbed on the kitchen counter. Without them, and with her heart dependent on a monitored pacemaker, the clock wasn't just ticking for the investigation. It was ticking for Nancy's very survival. The desert morning was bright, But for the Guthrie family, a long, dark night had begun. The federal response was instantaneous. By the evening of February 2, the FBI had established a command center in Tucson, joining forces with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Special Agent Marcus Thorne, a veteran of high-stakes abductions, stared at the technical data pulled from Nancy's home network. In the modern age, a kidnapping isn't just tracked by tire treads and fingerprints, it's tracked by data packets. Nancy's pacemaker was linked to a health monitoring app on her smartphone, a digital tether designed to alert doctors to irregularities. The data told a haunting story. At 2:28 a.m., less than an hour after the masked intruder appeared on the doorbell cam, the pacemaker's signal abruptly disconnected from the base station in the house. This suggested that Nancy and the device inside her chest had been moved beyond the range of the home's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. The silent signal was the last heartbeat of information the authorities had. It placed her in a vehicle, moving away from the safety of the foothills and into the vast, unmonitored stretches of the Arizona wilderness. As the technical teams dissected the digital trail, ground units began a grueling grid search. 2 miles from the residence, a breakthrough occurred. Discarded in the scrub brush near a turnout was a single dark glove. It matched the texture and style of the gloves worn by the intruder in the video. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, held a somber press conference confirming the find. "We have a forensic link," he stated, his voice tight. "We are processing this for DNA. We are looking for a ghost, but even ghosts leave shadows." The glove was rushed to the lab, carrying the weight of a nation's hope. Yet, as the DNA was extracted, the result was frustrating. Unknown male. The suspect had no prior record in the National CODIS database. He was a man with a plan, a man who had stayed under the radar until the moment he stepped onto that porch. By the end of the first week, the case took a surreal turn. Public interest was at a fever pitch, fueled by Savannah Guthrie's emotional pleas on the Today Show. "Please," she whispered to the cameras, "she needs her medicine. Just bring her to a hospital. No questions asked." But the captors weren't looking for a peaceful resolution. They were looking for a payday. A ransom note appeared not at the Guthrie home, but in the inbox of a major news outlet. It was a digital demand for $6 million, to be paid in an untraceable cryptocurrency. The FBI's cybercrime unit immediately went to work, attempting to trace the routing of the email. It had been sent through a series of onion layers, bouncing off servers in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. While the public speculated on a professional syndicate, Agent Thorne remained skeptical. The demand felt opportunistic, almost frantic. Was it the original kidnapper, or a bottom feeder? A scammer using the tragedy to extort a high-profile family? The note contained no proof of life, no photograph of Nancy holding a current newspaper, and no mention of her specific medical needs. The confusion deepened when a second, then a third note arrived. Each one changed the amount. Each one used a different tone. The investigation was being bogged down by a static of false leads. Thousands of tips poured in from across the country, people claiming to have seen a masked man at a gas station in New Mexico, or an elderly woman in a van in Nevada. Each lead had to be vetted, pulling resources away from the primary search zone. The pressure on the FBI was immense. Every hour Nancy was missing increased the likelihood that her heart, deprived of its chemical and digital support, would simply stop.
So we got something in our email that looks like it's written like a ransom note for Savannah Guthrie's mother.
Specific requests
and they're very
for certain amounts of money,
very specific.
Bitcoin.
And also they say at the bottom, there are certain things they're saying about what she was wearing and damage to the house.
That they're clearly saying to verify that
it's us.
We know what we're talking about here.
So we've contacted the Sheriff's Department, and we want to get them this letter. We had a little trouble getting through to the right person, but the person we spoke with is now forwarding this to somebody in the Detective Bureau. So if my phone rings, I may have to stop and...
What's interesting is there was just a news conference that just ended with the sheriff, and he was asked about, and we're going to do this segment in a few minutes, but he was asked about a ransom note, and he just said, we're following all leads.
Yeah, and this it's again, we don't know
if
it's
this is legit, right.
if it's authentic or not, but they're when you read it, they're acting as if, yeah, only we would know these things,
Right.
and we're serious, and there's a dollar demand and an or else in there. So,
The kidnappers' secret, their identity, remained locked behind a wall of encryption and a mask, while the world watched the desert for any sign of movement. As the second week bled into the third, the geography of the search shifted south. Tucson sits a mere 60 miles from the Mexican border, a porous line that has long been a transit point for both legitimate trade and illicit activity. A fourth ransom letter, received on February 18, claimed that Nancy had been taken south of the border. This wasn't just a change in location, it was a change in jurisdiction. The FBI officially requested the assistance of the Mexican Federal Police and contacted the Matters Buscadores de Sonora, a courageous volunteer group known for finding the disappeared in the rugged terrain of northern Mexico. The prospect of Nancy being in Mexico added a layer of geopolitical complexity that the family found agonizing. If she was in the hands of a cartel, the $6 million demand took on a more sinister weight. However, the masked man from the video didn't fit the profile of a cartel operative. He worked alone, he used common retail gear, and he had made mistakes, like dropping the glove. Agent Thorne began to wonder if the Mexico lead was a red herring, a deliberate attempt to send the FBI scrambling into the desert while the suspect remained closer than anyone imagined. In a small town near Oracle, Arizona, the locals began to notice a shift. The heavy presence of black SUVs and low-flying helicopters was impossible to ignore. Rumors began to circulate about a secret resident in one of the isolated ranch houses, a man who had suddenly started paying for everything in cash and whose wife hadn't been seen at the grocery store in weeks. The FBI wasn't just looking at the border, they were circling back to the original evidence. They were re-interviewing every person who had ever worked on the Guthrie estate, every security contractor, and every disgruntled former employee. The monster wasn't a phantom from across the border. He was someone who knew the layout of the house. He was someone who knew exactly when the family would be gone. February 21 marked the 21st day since Nancy vanished. In the basement of a nondescript property 40 miles north of Tucson, the air was cold and still. The secret that the kidnapper had guarded so fiercely was beginning to rot from the inside out. Arthur, a man who had never been more than a shadow in his own life, sat at a kitchen table, his head in his hands. He had thought the money would come quickly. He had thought the Guthrie family would pay any price within 48 hours. He hadn't counted on the FBI's no-negotiation stance or the sheer scale of the manhunt. His wife, Maria, stood by the window, watching the dust kick up on the long driveway. She knew about the glove. She had seen the news reports about the DNA. She knew it was only a matter of time before the unknown male was given a name. Every time a siren wailed on the highway, she felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She looked at the basement door, a heavy slab of wood that hid a dying woman and a mountain of guilt. The $200,000 reward for information was plastered on every billboard in the state. To Arthur, it was a threat. To Maria, it was an exit strategy. The tension in the house was a physical thing, a glass about to shatter. Arthur's secret wasn't just the kidnapping, it was the fact that he was losing control. He was no longer the one in charge. The FBI was closing in on his digital trail, tracing the handshake of his failed Bitcoin demands. But the real threat was closer. Maria's hand drifted toward her phone. She thought of Nancy, shivering in the dark, and then she thought of herself. As the sun began to set on the 21st day, the abductor's wife made a choice. The silence was about to be broken, not by a ransom payment, but by a confession. The hunt for Nancy Guthrie was moving toward its final, violent, and factual conclusion. As the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie enters its 21st day, the forensic momentum has hit a significant and frustrating obstacle. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, confirmed this weekend that the unknown male DNA, recovered from a black glove found 2 miles from Nancy's home, has returned no matches in the national CODIS database. This revelation suggests the abductor may not have a prior felony record, making him a ghost in the system. Further complicating the science, Sheriff Nanos revealed in an NBC interview that biological evidence recovered from inside Nancy's home consists of mixed DNA, samples containing genetic material from more than one person. The agency is currently utilizing a specialized lab in Florida to attempt to deconvolute these samples, but the sheriff warned that resolving these technical issues could take weeks or even months. Despite the delay, the FBI is not relenting. They are now pivoting to investigative genetic genealogy, the same advanced tactic used to solve the Golden State Killer case, in hopes of identifying the suspect through distant family members. With DNA results stalled, the FBI has shifted its focus to the pre-operational phase of the crime. Technical analysts have uncovered evidence suggesting this was not a random burglary gone wrong, but a targeted stalking. Data sweeps of local internet traffic indicate that someone in the Tucson area began searching for Nancy's specific address and floor plan as early as June 2025. The suspect seen on the doorbell camera at 1:47 a.m. on February 1 was armed with a handgun and carried a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. Because this brand is exclusive to Walmart, the FBI has embedded agents with Walmart's corporate security team to trace every sale of that specific backpack in the Southwest region over the last 6 months. They are looking for a male, approximately 59 to 510, with an average build and what appears to be a mustache or goatee. A new minute detail has also emerged. Sheriff Nanos noted that the suspect appears to be wearing a ring underneath his gloves, a unique identifier that investigators hope will trigger a memory from a shopkeeper or acquaintance. As of February 22, the reward for information leading to Nancy's location stands at $200,000, bolstered by an anonymous donor. Despite this life-changing sum and over 21,000 tips submitted to the FBI, the silence remains unbroken. Law enforcement has intensified its appeal to the public, specifically asking people to be vigilant for anyone in their lives who has gone under the radar or been uncharacteristically absent since February 1. While a fourth ransom letter was recently sent to TMZ claiming Nancy is south of the border, the Mexican embassy officially stated on February 20 that there is no indication she has been moved into Mexico. For Savannah Guthrie and her family, the situation has reached an hour of desperation. They continue to plead for proof of life, but 3 weeks into the abduction, no such proof has been provided. The investigation remains a massive, multi-agency effort, with hundreds of agents scouring the Arizona desert, holding onto the hope that the suspect's secret will finally be betrayed by a single, actionable tip.